If you go an entire month without a single good day, that's not just life being life. That's a warning light, not a loud one. Not the kind that forces everything to stop. It's the kind that stays on quietly while you keep moving, hoping it will turn itself off on its own. Most people don't call it a problem. They say, this is just how things are now. They're still getting up in the morning, still doing what needs to be done, still handling responsibilities. From the outside, everything looks fine. And when someone asks how they're doing, the answer comes easily. I'm okay. A lot of people in the second half of life don't describe themselves as unhappy. They don't feel miserable enough to complain. They're functioning, they're managing, they're getting through the day. But when you listen closely to how they talk about their lives, there's something missing. There's no warmth in the story, no moment where they stop and say, that felt good, or I'm glad I did that. A healthy life doesn't mean waking up happy every morning. Most days are ordinary, neutral. You move through them without much thought. That's normal. What isn't normal is when there are no good days at all. Not one day in weeks where you feel a little lighter, a little more like yourself. When everything feels muted and you slowly start believing that this is just what adulthood or aging feels like. That isn't resilience, that's wear. What makes it hard to notice is that many people don't realize what's happening. Others sense it, but don't allow themselves to name it. They grew up believing you push through, you don't make a fuss, and you don't call quiet exhaustion a problem as long as you're still standing. So instead of asking what's wrong, they adjust. They shrink their emotional range and call it maturity. Depression doesn't always arrive as sadness. Often it shows up as dullness, like a low-grade fever that never breaks. People blame stress, or age, or the season of life they're in. And little by little, without ever deciding to, they accept a smaller version of living. This happens a lot during the years when responsibility stacks up. People are caring for aging parents while still worrying about adult children. They're carrying financial pressure, work expectations, health concerns, and the quiet fear of how long their energy will last. None of it feels optional. And somewhere in the middle of managing everyone else's needs, their own inner life slips to the bottom of the list. They don't fall apart. They just go quiet. There was a man in his late 60s who described it in a way that stayed with me. One evening after dinner, he realized he'd been sitting in the same chair for over an hour. The television on, not really watching anything. Nothing was wrong. The house was calm. The day had gone fine. But when his wife casually asked what he wanted to do the next day, he couldn't think of a single thing he was looking forward to. That moment startled him, not because he felt sad, but because he felt nothing at all. That's when he understood something had shifted. Often, the signs show up in small, easy-to-miss ways like that. People stop looking forward to things they used to enjoy. Conversations feel more like obligations than connection. Even rest doesn't feel restorative anymore. They finally sit down at night, free from the day, and instead of relief, there's just a quiet emptiness. Nothing hurts sharply enough to demand attention, but nothing feels nourishing either. Over time, that absence becomes familiar. And once something feels familiar, people stop questioning it. What confuses many people is that two individuals can live under very similar pressures and respond in completely different ways. One feels crushed, another copes, another somehow keeps moving forward without losing themselves. That difference isn't about character or willpower. It's often about wiring. Some people are born more sensitive. Their nervous systems register stress quickly and hold on to it longer. Others have a natural buffer. Then there's interpretation, how the mind explains what's happening. One person looks at difficulty and thinks, this is unbearable. Another thinks, this is hard, but I can get through it. When sensitivity and interpretation collide in the wrong way, life feels heavier than it needs to. Not because someone is broken, but because the weight keeps landing in the same vulnerable place. Over time, some people develop a skill most of us were never taught. They learn how to set things down. They care deeply. They show up. They take responsibility seriously. But when the moment passes, they don't carry it into every corner of their life. They deal with work when they're at work. They deal with worry when it's time to care. And when they leave, they leave. Not because they don't care, but because replaying pain doesn't solve it. It only spreads it. You can often see the difference in small, ordinary moments. One person brings the stress of the day into dinner, into conversation, into bed at night. Another learns, slowly, imperfectly, to say, "This stays here." That the boundary isn't cold, it's learned, and it's protective. There's another truth that doesn't get talked about much. Not every inner struggle needs to be forced into clarity. We like to believe mental health is always about confronting reality head-on. But real life is messier than that. What matters most is harm. If something is dangerous, if it threatens safety, it needs to be addressed. But if someone is surviving, staying connected, and not harming anyone, stability sometimes matters more than being technically right. Life rarely fits into clean categories. And then there's the uncomfortable part. Who we really are doesn't show up when life is easy. It shows up at home when no one's watching. It shows up in crisis, when survival takes over. And it shows up when power enters the picture and removes restraint. Some people soften with age, others harden. Position doesn't change people, it reveals what was already there. The hopeful part is that even when life begins to feel sealed shut, it doesn't always require a dramatic change to let air back in. People don't always need a new life. Sometimes they need a new space. A place where they're not only a role, not only the dependable one. A class, a group, music, learning something they once set aside. New spaces introduce new people, and new people often reconnect us to parts of ourselves we forgot were still there. And often, what helps most isn't advice. It's one person who listens, someone who doesn't rush, fix, or minimize, someone who lets the truth be spoken out loud and stays. That kind of presence can stop quiet fatigue from turning into something much heavier. Medicine can treat symptoms, but healing happens when the inner life is finally met instead of managed. If you've been moving through your days without a single good one in sight, this isn't a failure of character. It may simply be a kind of tiredness that deserves attention. Thank you for spending this time here. I'm grateful you chose to listen, and grateful we get to have these conversations together. If something in this resonated with you, feel free to share your thoughts. And if you know someone who might need these words, pass them along. Until next time, take care, and don't ignore the quiet signals.